This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast, brought to you by Goldrock Capital. Each week, we look at how high net worth families can improve their lives, decisions, and investments in a deeply uncertain world. We always aim to provide practical information, even if we can't offer specific investment advice.
Hi, welcome to the Definitely Uncertain podcast by Goldrock Capital. My name is David Ram, and I'm a partner at Goldrock Capital, the more than 20-year-old multifamily office servicing high net worth investors in Israel and around the world. With me today is Lilac Mandeles, the co-founder and CEO of TechforCann Europe Accelerator. Welcome, Lilac.
Welcome, David.
Thanks so much for joining me. So the topic today is about cannabis, maybe more specifically the medical cannabis market, from an investor's perspective as well. Maybe to kickstart the process, you can give a more detailed introduction to yourself. Love to hear about your personal story as well.
Okay, thank you for having me. So I'm actually coming from the pharmaceutical industry, the big pharma. I spent 20 plus years in big leading companies like Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, and Teva, where I was heading the global strategic marketing of Copaxone, a $4 billion product, drug for MS. I guess you know this one.
I do.
And then after this journey, I joined the medical cannabis industry as a vice president, business development and global marketing for a leading company called Better, Cann Pharmaceuticals. And quickly realized that people are looking for innovations within Israel, and founded TechforCann as a portfolio company that looked on different technologies and adopt them to the medical cannabis industry. Following to this, met my partner Yona, and together we have received a commitment from Malta Enterprise, which is the government of Malta. We got 2.5 million euros for establishing the first tech-based accelerator dedicated to the medical cannabis industry.
Very interesting. And that's an interesting background because I'm not sure if it's true, but it seems like a lot of the big pharma companies, the ones that you have a lot of experience with in your background, how active are those guys in the medical cannabis market today? Are they kind of avoiding it and waiting for the startup guys to build up and then acquire in the future? What are their activities in that market?
That's exactly what you said. I mean, the big pharma could not take risks on not knowing what the medical cannabis will look like. So they are having a very close look. Some of them have already invested, like Novartis, we already know. And I think GW Pharmaceutical is a good example for the big pharma getting into in that space. And maybe I could elaborate a little bit about GW Pharmaceuticals later on.
Okay, great. Yeah. So maybe to start the conversation, just give us a bit of a high-level perspective on what the market looks like today, because obviously there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of expectations, I guess, also very high valuations, across the value chain in cannabis. Obviously, the big two groups are the medical and the recreational, but there's a lot of aspects along the value chain as well. Maybe you can give a bit of an overview of what the market looks like today and what your expectations are for the growth as well.
Yeah, I think everybody see the global medical cannabis industry is growing, and we see a double-digit growth, yearly growth, with clear economical advantage. And just the latest data, market research from Bridge have shown that the market is projected to grow at an annual rate of nearly 18 months through 2028. And
18%? Is that what you?
18%. And the global market is expected to reach $50 billion in less than 5 years. But actually, I believe that there's a unique opportunity in gaining momentum in the European medical cannabis right now. Because as of April 2021, the medical cannabis market in Europe alone was valued at almost $5 billion. and is expected to reach $13.5 billion by 2026. Now, the medical market in Europe is a medical, okay?
Yeah.
It's maturing. It owes to the legalization of the various market, but we see that there are more products, easy to find. Some FDA-approved cannabis-made medicines are available. Many more R&D products are in clinical stage. So, and we see more prescriptions for more indications by more different types of physicians in Europe. And I think in many ways, it's a time-sensitive opportunity in Europe right now, because we are really at the same point where North America was 5 years ago. So a dramatic opportunity for exponential growth in Europe.
Interesting. I got to assume that when you think about that $5 billion market today growing to a $13-14 billion market in a few years, in Europe in particular, I got to assume regulation and compliance is probably the most challenging aspect of that growth, because obviously Europe, as opposed to the US, is quite segmented amongst countries. Obviously, the US was pretty much a state issue, I think. In the US, it's like state by state, they had to legalize it as well.
Right.
But in Europe, every country is so different. So walk us through, from a risk perspective, regulation, compliance. Is there other risks that you should be thinking about as an investor as well?
Well, you're right. Correct. Regulation and compliance is a major growth factor in our industry.
Yeah.
And the industry is segmenting as part of its development. The first milestone is really recognizing this segmentation, whether it's an adult use, wellness, or medicinal. There are really three main segments that you need to pay attention to. One would be the recreational, the adult use, the leisure one. The second would be the well-being, the quality of life, the wellness segment. And the third will be the medicinal cannabis, actually prescriptions that are cannabis-based medicine for specific indication that attend to treat diseases and illnesses. Now, as a result, from each segments had to meet different regulations and compliance requirements, legalization versus medicalizations. However, in general, there are basic high standards for all markets that follow pharma standards to create safe and good products based on what we call GMP, good manufacturing products. In Europe, by the way, which is a medicinal market only, all products have to go through a EU GMP standards. That is a bit more complicated, and it could be a barrier to enter Europe.
Is it very similar to a regular prescription drug process? Is that what you're referring to? Is that a very similar process?
Well, GMP is about manufacturing. It's good manufacturing products. Mm-hmm. If it's a pharmaceutical product, if it's a medicinal pharmaceutical product, it has to go through an FDA approved as well. But in general, the industry, and I believe, understand that to remain a dynamic growth industry, companies have to have product, processes, solutions that are EU GMP certified, clinically validated, safe and sustainable. And I think our accelerator is focused on the European market. And we do believe that innovations that is adapted to the regulation will resolve industry challenges. This is why we actually built this hybrid accelerator program that is adapted to the EU GMP requirements, that actually offering entrepreneurs the biggest opportunity to get ahead in Europe.
Yeah. I'd love you to spend 30 seconds, if you could, on, because you added a category which I never heard of. I'm aware of recreation, I'm aware of medical, but you had that in between with the wellness category. What is there a regulatory compliance aspect in the wellness category that's more light versus medical, or is it more of a marketing aspect above and beyond just pure recreation?
Well, it's like food supplement versus pharma. So it's pharmaceutical would be aligned with an FDA CE mark. versus food supplements, which are, it's a lighter, it's a more CBD world based in many countries. And it's a GMP and a EU GMP certifications.
So just on CBD, so obviously you could just maybe touch on that because not everyone knows what CBD is, but CBD obviously I think is the non-hallucinogenic aspects of the cannabis plant. And there's a lot of creams or a lot of, I'm not sure what other aspects within the non-prescription market. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct. I mean, CBD is only one of 150 cannabinoids that were identified already, which is CBD is one of the active ingredients within the medical cannabis and within the cannabis plant. And basically, I see a huge value with all the 150 cannabinoids that were identified that still have to be researched. Each one of them is bringing new scientific opportunity and hope to patients around the world. So it's not just CBD or THC that everybody knows. In fact, there are 30 cannabinoids that have some data on their clinical effect. 3 of them are already isolated and produced on a large scale.
Interesting. One thing I've noticed as well, in the medical cannabis market as well, is that when you have a company active in medical cannabis, they take a very active role across the value chain of cannabis, oftentimes even on the growing of cannabis as well. Which aspect of the market, which segment of the market are you most excited about? And is that true? Are guys, like you mentioned the company GW, I think it was called, or others, are they also getting very active on a vertical integration approach where they're taking growing, production, distribution? Are they taking all the aspects on their shoulders, or are they only focusing on one? How is it working in your eyes today?
They do. First, I'm most excited with the therapeutic potential of this plant. I mean, the fact that there are currently 700 clinical trials around the world in leading universities on different diseases is exciting. Not just compassionate use for pain, but treating autism, epilepsy, diabetes, and even different types of cancer. This is exciting. So it's just a matter of time before this research will be commercialized. And I think, innovations that change patients' life is exciting. But if I'm looking specifically, I see 4 areas where innovation can create great impact and will integrate into the cannabis industry to biotech, pharma, and big data. One would be definitely healthcare and biotech, which is all around pharmaceuticals, medical device, digital health, synthetic cannabinoids. Formulations is a huge thing. Testing, education. And then there is the issue of digital operation that looks all over automation of manufacturing process within the cannabis industry. And the third area would be agri-tech, looking on genetics and breeding techniques and growing materials. And then the fourth would be the new product technology, everything around wellness, what we talked before, topicals, veterinarian, different types of product. But if we're looking specifically on GW is completely vertically integrated. They are growing, but they're also having Epidiolex, which is a huge inspiration to the medical segment. It is a CBD drug for the Vent syndrome. It's CBD with sesame oil. I mean, it is what it is, but it was well done by GW Pharmaceuticals and
they're growing the plant as well, you're saying?
They're growing the plant, and 2021 yearly sales of this single drug were above $500 million.
$500 million.
$500 million.
Wow.
I think GW Pharmaceuticals really demonstrated how you can reach a pharmaceutical blockbuster by creating a trusted, clinically proven cannabinoids medicine.
Right.
And
That brings me to the next question, which you and I have spoken about before, Lilac, which relates to the growing aspect, which is very important, of course, for the medical cannabis or the wellness cannabis market as well, which is that the $500 million, that's a good data point to focus on, obviously relates to some of the cost structure that the company GW has. And when growing is very expensive, be it because of regulation or land costs or whatever the reason is, their processes are not well known yet, costs are high, therefore revenues have to be high, sales have to be higher on a per unit basis. But when those costs go down eventually and the growing becomes much more standardized, I would only assume that a lot of the revenues would also, or the sales prices would go down as well. So when you think about valuations of companies like GW or others, how are you thinking about the relationship between the valuation and their current revenue versus future revenue based on potentially the cost structure dropping dramatically?
Well, basically, when you're thinking about the cost of goods, okay, of the plant, in the future it might change, but we're still not scratching the surface of this opportunity yet. Mm-hmm. I mean, some global markets are just opening, so there's a huge unmet need to good products. But looking in the future, in order to grow, I think producers, as part of their development, will have to integrate innovation as a differentiator. And I think that we see ourselves in the accelerator. Our focus is on leading the innovation in the medical cannabis ecosystem. So like more patients can benefit from this great plant. And we want to make sure that the cannabis industry offer more products, processes, solutions that are clinically validated, safe, sustainable, and cost-effective. But if you're looking on GW specifically, Epidiolex, the cost of producing Epidiolex, most of the costs were making sure that it's FDA approved. It wasn't the plant.
That's not going away.
Okay, this is the reason that they were purchased by Jazz Pharmaceutical with a valuation of $7 billion. Mm-hmm. This is quite an amazing success. Yeah.
Interesting. So we can see you're very passionate about the opportunity set for the medical cannabis in particular, and of course, if you can provide higher standard of living and higher quality of life for a lot of people through better drugs, that's great. There seems to be some level of market hesitancy, though, from the investor community. People look at the medical cannabis market as, it's a cannabis product, and they compare it to things like alcohol or tobacco or some of the other, aspects of the investment community that people do not get involved with that much anymore. What's happening with that hesitancy? Are there other issues? Are people getting more excited about it? I'll add one more quick point, which of course is the very big deal around the opioid issue in the U.S. as an example, which is in the big pharma markets. Of course, there's a massive addiction issue around opioids, and maybe cannabis has less of that problem. But maybe you can walk us through investor hesitancy and how we can get over that in order to, expand the opportunity for medical cannabis.
Okay, so I think, yes. I mean, basically, you're right. There is still stigma that is related to tobacco, alcohol. Although today it's clear that the medical use of cannabis overweight the risks. But still, there is also a real concern about the safety and the validity when consuming a product that can be unstable. There are more than 1,000 different types of strains. Each strain has different compositions of active ingredients, active cannabinoids. So they're still concerned with what exactly can you produce, and what type of impact a specific strain will be, and can you make that alignment with the same strains. Mm-hmm. And I think there's also still a concern with companies overpromising in this sector.
Yeah.
I think once we have more FDA-approved cannabinoids-based medicines like Epidiolex or different formulations, which is, I believe, that would be the future of the cannabis and the medical cannabis industry in the market, this hesitancy will probably gone, but then the valuation would be much higher.
Right. No, that's a good point. I think in every market, in any market segment where you see a very low starting base, like you're starting from a very low point because it's an early market and you have high growth potential, you'll see a lot of companies emerge that maybe not fraud, but let's call them companies that are over-promising, like you said, and maybe promising things that they cannot even deliver in reality. And in fact, one of the things that I always notice with early stage investing is that a lot of companies raise money when they need and not raise money when they can. I mean, today, of course, it's a very frothy market, but in a market like cannabis and medical cannabis in particular, especially with your experience on the pharma side, you know that these products, these kinds of companies require large amounts of capital to reach the milestones they need to get to in order to deliver the products to the market. It's a long time. FDA approvals or CE approvals that are very long processes. The whole aspect around drug development is a very expensive process. One of the things I always worry about with clients of ours or other high net worth investors is make sure when a company is out there raising money, that they're raising enough money to achieve milestones that would allow them to raise more money to get to the next milestone and more money to get to the next milestone in order to build shareholder value long term. You're on the accelerator side, so you're obviously helping companies get to where they need to get to. How are you advising those companies to make sure that their business plan, their capital raise approach is strong in order for them to get to the next level? I see too many companies not raising enough money.
This is exactly one of the gaps we identified when we established the accelerator. Now, the government of Malta has committed for us for 2.5 million euros to establish this first tech IP-based accelerator. And they gave us support for 20 in startups over the next 18 months. But our goal would be to identify and accelerate those early stage IP-based breakthrough companies. So one of the processes we are very proud of is our methodological selection process that includes an adapted scientific advisory committee to each one of the processes. And this is an opportunity for investors to get into the industry, into this industry, and invest in early but winning portfolio of international, pre-vetted, and innovative tech companies, and benefit from an intense methodological due diligence conducted through the accelerator by industry leaders. In addition to this, the accelerator takes equity in each startup as part of our commitment to keep supporting the startups by selected group of service providers and industry experts that keep refining the startup strategy, make sure that they do the right raise enough, as you mentioned.
Yes.
By the end of each cohort, investors actually can receive an option to further invest with preferred term options. So we actually saw that issue and made our accelerator adapted to it. Good.
So as investors are looking at the market, besides for the not raising enough capital, when investors are looking at companies in this market, give us 1-2 examples of things that you could flag for an investor and say, hey, watch out for this issue or be careful with that risk. We spoke about regulation, compliance. We spoke about not raising enough capital. What else do you see out there? 1 or 2 other major risks that investors should look out for that are specific to the medical cannabis market?
Well, 2 risks. 1, be aware of those who overcommit and underperform. So like in every business there's already some data about past. You can compare. It's not as, the medical cannabis industry is already have a mileage. So make sure that you're exploring the performance of this company first.
Right.
And this is one thing. So statement is one thing, but real numbers is the other. And then never underestimate the proper methodological due diligence process, because it's not just a scientific advice that you need to get. It's also a legal advice on the IP that you're looking at, if it's an innovative technology within that space. And this is really important. But I think those are the risks, but there are so many undiscovered gems in the industry. So I really recommend to investors to join the ecosystem, to be part of that celebration, because there is a great momentum as I see it today.
That's exciting. Yeah, I think looking at the intellectual property is a great advice, especially as you're saying, in a very innovative new market where there's so many new things that are being discovered from scratch almost in this exciting new market. So, well, I really appreciate you joining us, Lilac, and for the Israeli listeners, Lilac, I guess, is the other option.
That's the name.
Yeah. If people want to learn more about what you're up to, what you're doing, where should we point those listeners to?
Well, just check our website, TechforCann Europe Accelerator. Everything is there. We're a lot of work and a lot of opportunities out there.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, Lilac.